3.5 million gallons of crystal clear water sits in the middle of one of the driest deserts on the continent. No filter, no chlorine, no pump. The water has been rising out of the earth on its own, every single day, for longer than anyone can measure. And most people have never heard of it. That is Texas. The state buries things. Oil towns dressed up as carnivals. Ghost towns with afterlives. Villages of 3 people that show up in country songs. The tourism board isn't going to tell you the honest version, so we will. If that sounds like the kind of channel you'd come back to, subscribe now. Then let's get into the countdown. Number 12, Luling. About an hour south of Austin, on a flat stretch of South Texas, there is a town where the downtown oil wells wear costumes. A watermelon eating girl. Tony the tiger. A shark. A cow jumping over the moon. All of them bolted onto reel, working pumpjacks that bob up and down all day long, pulling crude out of the ground. The Chamber of Commerce calls it art in motion. The pumpjacks don't care what you call them. The Rafael Rios No. 1 well came in on August 9th, 1922, after 6 dry holes. That's the day Luling stopped being ordinary. Decades later, someone decided the solution to the eyesore of downtown oilfield equipment was not to remove it, but to paint cartoon characters on top of it. And here is what that looks like on the ground. A visitor walking through Luling's main drag sees what looks like a theme park prop, gets close enough to laugh at it, and then notices the crude actually moving through the pipe behind the painted grin. The joke and the industry are the same object, and neither one is stopping. Luling also hosts the Watermelon Thump Festival, with a seed-spitting contest whose record sits around 68 feet. A town this committed to its own absurdity shouldn't be real. The pumps are still running. Number 11, Turkey. Out in the Panhandle, where the land flattens out and the wind has nothing to stop it, there is a town of about 400 people that spends most of the year quiet, and one weekend every April turns into something else entirely. 10,000 people drive in for Bob Wills Day, the Super Bowl of Western Swing, as the town calls it, to honor a man who fused fiddle music with big band jazz and changed what country music sounded like. Bob Wills grew up on a farm right here. The town built a museum. There is a granite monument. Every year since 1972, the festival has run, and Turkey claims him fully and without apology. Here is the asterisk. Wills wasn't born in Turkey. He was born near Kase, about 300 miles away. He spent his formative years here and then left, as people do when they become legends. The town's name, by the way, is exactly as literal as it sounds. It comes from the wild turkeys that once roosted on Turkey Creek nearby. Nothing poetic about it. A near-empty Panhandle town built its entire identity on a man who left it, and it works, which is either inspiring or a little sad, depending on how far you drove to get there. Number 10, West. Central Texas, about 20 miles north of Waco. The name makes no geographic sense and was never intended to. The town is named for Thomas West, an early settler and postmaster, not for any point on a compass. It sits squarely in the middle of the state. What the town actually is, Czech. Waves of Czech immigrants settled the farmland here around the turn of the 20th century, and West became a kolache town. Czech bakeries, meat markets, a state-designated Czech heritage capital, and Westfest, a Czech Labor Day festival that has run since 1976. It is warm, it is specific, and it is about as far from the surrounding landscape's assumptions as you can get. The catch is the comma. Because West Texas and West Texas sound nearly identical, there is a long, mild history of confusion. And then April 2013, when the West Fertilizer Company exploded and killed 15 people, and national headlines had to keep inserting the comma to explain that this was a Czech kolache town in central Texas, not the vast region 400 miles to the west. A town named after a direction, it isn't in carries that comma everywhere it goes now. It is load-bearing. Number 9, Crystal City, South Texas. A town that erected a statue of Popeye the Sailor in 1937, often described as the first monument in the country raised to a cartoon character. The origin is straightforward enough. Crystal City was a Depression-era spinach powerhouse. The Popeye cartoon had just put spinach on the map, and the statue was built with the blessing of the character's creator. Charming, photogenic, a reasonable thing to put on a sign. The statue is the least of what happened here. Picture this. A visitor posing in front of Popeye is standing in a town where, in 1963, 5 candidates known as Los Cinco swept the city council in a historic upset of Anglo political control, where, in 1969, a student walkout helped launch the broader Chicano civil rights movement across the country, and where, during World War II, the Crystal City internment camp held more than 4,000 people of Japanese, German, and Italian ancestry, including Japanese Latin Americans brought in from other countries specifically for prisoner exchanges. Until 1948, 3 separate chapters of American history stacked inside a town most people think of as the spinach capital. The cartoon statue is visible from the road. The rest takes more than a glance to find. Number 8, Monahans, Permian Basin, West Texas. An oil and ranch landscape that runs flat and hard in every direction, and then, rising out of it, sand dunes up to 70 feet tall. Monahans Sandhills State Park opened in 1957 to protect a slice of a dune field that runs all the way north into New Mexico. People sled down these dunes on boards. Kids rent discs at the park entrance. It looks like something the set designer got wrong. The explanation is deep time. The ancient Pecos River carried the sand in over thousands of years, and the wind built it into dunes, and then the river moved on and the dunes stayed. The roughly 4,000-acre park holds only a fragment of the total field, and the dunes are alive, wine-driven, always shifting, never quite the same landscape 2 visits in a row. Beneath the sand, of course, sits one of the most productive oil regions in North America. Monahans is a boomtown, but the strangest thing in Monahans is the one thing nobody drilled for, still moving across the surface while the Permian Basin hums below it. Number 7, uncertain. Far East Texas, on the edge of Caddo Lake, where the cypress trees hang over dark water and the bayous don't go where you expect them to. Population, about 85. Legal name, uncertain. That is correct. That is the actual, official, incorporated name of the town. Why? Ask a local, and you'll get one of 3 answers, none of them documented. Some say steamboat captains couldn't get a reliable bearing on uncertain landing because the water moved. Some say the founders filled out their incorporation paperwork in 1961, didn't know what to write in the name field, put uncertain, and nobody ever changed it. Some say early settlers were genuinely unsure of their own citizenship, living in the ambiguous border zone between the United States and the Republic of Texas. Pick one. All 3 are undocumented local tradition, which means the origin of the name uncertain is, fittingly, uncertain. What is documented is that the town sits on Caddo Lake, the only large natural lake in Texas formed without a dam, and that it is legally named for a condition its own history cannot escape. The most honest town name in Texas, and nobody can prove why. You've made it halfway through a list of towns that have no right to exist. What's still coming includes a place that sold its legal name to a television company for free satellite service. Stay with it. Number 6, Luckenbach, population 3. You will recognize the name from a song, which is exactly the problem and the whole point. In 1849, German settlers built a trading post here in the Texas Hill Country and called it Luckenbach. By the 1960s, it was nearly gone. A dance hall, a general store, and not much else. Then in 1970, a humorist and rancher named Hondo Crouch bought the whole place and appointed himself mayor of a population of 3. His motto, everybody's somebody in Luckenbach. He didn't fix the town up so much as lean into its own emptiness, throwing small festivals for no reason, turning the general store into a gathering spot, treating the whole thing as a running joke that happened to have a mailing address. He died in 1976. 1 year later, Waylon Jennings released Luckenbach, Texas, with Willie Nelson on the last verse. It went to number 1 for 6 weeks. And here's the part that makes this whole story strange. Neither Waylon Jennings nor the songwriters had ever set foot in Luckenbach when they wrote and recorded it. The outlaw country dream they put on tape. The escape from the noise, the simplicity, the getting back to basics, was imagined entirely from the outside, sight unseen. The man who built the real version never heard the song. The song made the real version famous. The town was invented twice, once by a rancher, once by a songwriter who'd never been there. The second invention made the first one permanent. Number 5, Dish. All capitals. North of Fort Worth, there is a town whose legal name is a corporate brand. It was incorporated in 2000 as the town of Clark. Then, in November 2005, roughly 125 residents voted to rename the entire municipality Dish, in exchange for 10 years of free basic satellite TV and a free DVR for every household. The deal was with Dish Network. The town got free service. The company got national headlines. Every mailing address, every government document, every road sign became an advertisement. The man the town was originally named for, an early local booster who had pushed for incorporation, reportedly found it difficult to watch his family name replaced by a cable brand for the price of a decade of television. A resident of Dish writing out a return address is printing a corporate logo where a hometown should be. That is still the deal, and it is still the legal name. Keep that in mind, because it gets stranger. Dish sits atop the Barnett Shale. When the gas boom came, a town-funded air quality test found elevated benzene levels, and the Punchline suburb became an early case study in fracking and air quality that made different kinds of headlines. They sold the name for free TV and got a very different story a few years later. You're almost at the top. And what's left includes a town that claimed a UFO crash 50 years before Roswell, a ghost town whose entire afterlife runs on a chili feud, and the most improbable oasis in North America. Stay with it. Number 4. Aurora. Northwest of Fort Worth, there is a small Texas town that claims something most places would envy. A UFO crashed here in 1897, 50 years before Roswell. The story, printed in the Dallas Morning News in April of that year, described a cigar-shaped airship striking a windmill, exploding, and scattering wreckage across the property of a Judge Proctor. The dead pilot, described as not of this world, was given a Christian burial in the local cemetery. The story spread. People came to look. Here is the part that holds. In 1897, Aurora was dying. A railroad had bypassed it. An epidemic had gutted the population. A town in that condition, in that era, needed something. In 1980, a lifelong resident told Time magazine that the local newspaper correspondent made the entire story up to draw attention to a failing community. Subsequent investigators, including teams with ground-penetrating radar, found an unmarked grave in the cemetery, but nothing conclusive. Texas officially classifies the incident as legend. A UFO tourist standing in the Aurora Cemetery today is visiting a grave that may not exist, in a town that may have invented its most famous resident as an act of survival. And the strategy has worked for over a century. The alien is still doing its job. Number 3. Terlingua. Remote desert, near Big Bend, one of the emptiest corners of Texas. Stone ruins, collapsed walls, the skeleton of a company town that held 2,000 to 3,000 people at its peak and then emptied out when the money left. Howard Perry, a Chicago businessman, founded the Chisos Mining Company in 1903. The hills here held cinnabar, the ore that produces mercury. And mercury had uses that made it worth mining in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert. The company town operated at a remove. Perry ran it from Illinois while workers and their families lived in Terlingua. When mercury prices collapsed, Perry went bankrupt in 1942. The mines closed by the late 1940s. The population scattered. The ruins stayed. In 1967, a Dallas journalist staged a publicity stunt chili cook-off in the ghost town. A showdown between a humorist and a Texas chili cook designed to generate a headline. It worked so completely that Terlingua now hosts 2 rival chili championships on the same November weekend, both claiming to be the original, both drawing thousands of people to a place with no permanent population to speak of. Picture this. You drive hours into the desert, past the point where the radio stops picking up anything useful, and you arrive at stone ruins surrounded by people in lawn chairs arguing about chili. The ruins are the venue. The ghost town is the attraction. A dead mercury mining camp in the Chihuahuan Desert has an afterlife. And the afterlife is a feud between 2 organizations over who owns the soul of a stunt from 1967. Number 2. Marfa. Remote high desert West Texas. A cattle and railroad town that makes no sense on 3 separate counts, and all 3 are simultaneously true. First, Marfa is one of the most significant minimalist art destinations on Earth. The sculptor Donald Judd arrived in 1977, frustrated by the way museums compressed and contextualized his work, and he bought a decommissioned army fort on the edge of town. He converted the artillery sheds into permanent gallery space and filled them with large-scale installations. 100 aluminum boxes placed in 2 sheds, meant to be seen in the specific light of a specific West Texas afternoon. Nothing movable, nothing on loan. The Chinati Foundation now encompasses roughly 340 acres. Around 50,000 people make the drive out every year to see it. The nearest major airport is hours away. Second, about 26 miles down the highway, near the town of Valentine. Not in Marfa at all. A full-size Prada boutique stands alone in the desert. It has never sold anything. It is a 2005 art installation called Prada Marfa, and it is precisely as strange as it sounds. Designer handbags and shoes arranged in a storefront window in the middle of nowhere, accessible to no one. The geography is worth noting. It isn't in Marfa. The name is part of the piece. Third, east of town, the Marfa Lights. Mysterious glowing orbs, reported since the 1880s, with their own official highway viewing center. University studies in 2004 and 2008 traced most of the lights to car headlights refracting through layers of desert atmosphere. Most. A residue has never been fully accounted for, and the viewing center is occupied most nights by people squinting into the dark. 3 things that shouldn't exist, layered into one dying cattle town. Hotels book out months in advance. A failing place in the high desert reinvented itself around an artist who liked empty rooms, and the rooms are still full. Number 1, Balmorhea. This is where the cold open comes from. This is the thing that started this whole list. In the Chihuahuan Desert, a landscape that receives a few inches of rain in a good year, flat and sun-bleached and indifferent, there is a swimming pool nearly 2 acres across, 25 feet deep in places, holding around 3.5 million gallons of water. The water is always in the 70s. It is crystal clear, with visibility down to the bottom. It has never been chlorinated. The reason it exists is underground. San Solomon Springs, a natural artesian system, pushes somewhere between 15 and 28 million gallons of water up out of the desert floor every single day. No pump, no treatment. The water has been rising on its own since before anyone arrived to build anything around it. In the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps hand-built the pool and its stone bathhouses around the springs, fitting the structure to the water, not the other way around. Billed as the largest spring-fed swimming pool in the world, which is the kind of claim that sounds like local pride until you look at the numbers and realize there is no obvious rival. But the superlative is not the point. Picture this. You swim out toward the middle. The bottom drops away. You look down through 30 feet of undisturbed water, and there are fish below you. Live fish, moving through their own ecosystem, completely unbothered. Because you are not in a pool. You are in a desert spring. The Comanche Springs pupfish lives here. So does the Pecos gambizia. Both species are endangered. Both exist, in the wild, essentially only here. The pool is their habitat. You are a visitor to it. There is one more catch, which fits the rest of the list perfectly. The pool is not in Balmorhea. It sits in a small community called Toyavale, 9 miles away. The town of Balmorhea itself, named by stitching together the surnames of its 3 founders, is down the road. The most famous thing Balmorhea has is not in Balmorhea. Texas is large enough to bury its mistakes, its hoaxes, its dying towns, and its impossible geology, and large enough that all of them are still out there, completely real, waiting for someone to drive far enough to find them. Which one of these would you actually go see? And which one do you think has no business being on a map? Leave it in the comments. We read them. If Texas can hide a desert oasis and a cartoon character oil field, wait until you see what it did with its rivers. Next time, the Texas towns that water built, abandoned, and then washed away. If you want to be there for that one, subscribe and like the video now. It tells us to keep going.